Hello everyone, it's Dr. Domingo. I hope you are doing well. As I did for your previous two papers in this class, I have created a video for you with tips for your third assignment. And based on what I saw in the previous two papers, I know you'll all do well. So here we go. In this video, what I'll be doing is looking back at our class. Essentially, what does developing leaders of the future really mean? Then we'll look at the now. We'll look at specifically this upcoming paper that's due and talk a little bit in terms of tips, what I expect as usual, and then some other things. And finally, we'll talk a little bit in terms of what does it mean to move ahead with implementing your ideas. All right. When you started this class or registered for this class, I'm sure many of you were wondering, what does develop leaders of the future really mean? For some of you, it's developing those future leaders because you are in an educational context. And whether you're a teacher, administrator, or just an educator in general, working with students is one of the most common, classic, and honorable ways to develop future leaders. I think it's a wonderful thing. Others of you are in different spheres and different spaces. Maybe those are government places or even organizational and corporate settings. And developing future leaders ties with the organization and developing more capacity for other employees, so to speak. Whatever it is, both of those ideas and more are all right. And so I love these pictures here of the cat turning into a lion because really, future leaders recognize future leaders, or current leaders recognize those future leaders. And so this picture at the bottom right, this is one of my favorite pictures because it's a young LeBron James meeting Michael Jordan after Michael Jordan's basketball game. And I know, if you're a basketball fan, there's this debate back and forth over who's the GOAT, who's the greatest of all time. I'll leave it up to you, Michael Jordan. Anyway, all right, here we go. In this class, we've looked at developing leaders of the future, specifically through a transformational leadership lens. And that lens was presented to us from Kouzes and Posner, and particularly their book, The Leadership Challenge. And we've looked at really their 5 tenets or 5 dimensions of leadership. Perhaps, whatever you call them, the 5 aspects. They call them the exemplary practices of leadership, and you know them by now. Modeling the way, inspire shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. But yet, if you look at developing future leaders, you could also look at other leadership approaches, and I encourage you to do that because the transformational leadership approach, which is one of my favorite, is one of the most common when it comes to developing future leaders. But there are others as well. Perhaps it's situational leadership. And I know all of you remember this curve here from Hersey and Blanchard. Situational leadership. Perhaps it's leader-member exchange, where there's the in-group and the out-group. Perhaps it's authentic leadership. Maybe it's servant leadership. Whatever the lens is, there's many different ones to look at, but we've looked at the transformational leadership perspective. And as you know by now, here are the 5 practices of exemplary leadership as summarized by Kouzes and Posner. And you have them there, and then under each of the exemplary practices, there are different behaviors or specific practices that fall under them. And I encourage you, go back now and then and look at this because this is one of the best frameworks and easy to remember frameworks for leadership. All right, stepping back a little bit, this class was really built on 3 phases, if you will. The first phase, the first few weeks, few modules, we spent time on self-reflection. And if you think about it, we were looking at leadership and developing leaders of the future. First of all, what about ourselves? Who we are, our self-assessment. So this first few weeks of the class, we looked at leading and challenging the status quo, looking back, getting help from others, and looking within, introspection. We then turned our attention toward what does it mean once we know ourselves as leaders? What does it mean to develop a plan for leaders of the future? And we looked at concepts like organizational unity, being relational, and those discussions midterm. Toward the end of the term now, we're looking at, based on that vision for the future, first of all, knowing yourselves, and then having a vision for the future for your respective organizations, how do you actually make that happen? What are the practical strategies, and what are the barriers? Maybe they're institutional barriers. Maybe those are people barriers. Whatever the barrier is, how do you actually get this stuff done? That's the focus of the third paper. So here we go. How do you actually write it? Couple things. As you know, your paper is due at the end of Module 10 on or before 11:59 p.m. And what this is, it's your plan of action. Now, some people have asked, this looks very similar to the second paper. In fact, it is very similar to the second paper because in the second paper, you introduce your ideas and a vision. So this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, to say, how are you going to actually get that done? Think of this third paper as an extension, or really the application of paper number 2. Now, how do you write it without self-plagiarizing? The key is to build on the ideas. And where it makes a difference is how you express those ideas. Now, I don't want you to cut and paste verbatim or just say, in paper 2, we did this, here's how it's going to happen. I want you to build on those ideas, to recap some things, but also highlight and build out those ideas and the concepts you presented. The key is in how you say it and how you express it. In one sense, it is not self-plagiarism, but you are building on those ideas. Researchers and authors do this all the time. Remember, this paper is about how are you going to make that vision for leadership development happen. All right. This is a neat little slide because this is a quick little model about, first of all, it's leadership and planning. How do you develop the plan? What are the mission, vision, values, set the goals, define the objectives, the strategy, and then define some operations. So if you think about 1, 2, and 3, those are your paper number 2. Paper number 3 is really part 4 and 5. How do you actually execute the plan? What does it mean? And then how do you know you've gotten there? How do you know? How do you measure it? What sort of barriers? So this is a little planning diagram and model really about, looking at a plan, thinking about the implications and the issues as the first part, and then the second part is how do you actually get the plan done? All right, grading tips. Let's look at particulars about this. These are the different aspects to the paper. Now, the first obviously is an introduction and a brief description of the organization. Again, you can use the same organization that you did in paper 2, but just go ahead and build. Make sure the mission and vision is clear. Make sure the demographics are clear. You could say it in a different way. Second part is the discussion of the current state of leadership development. What is actually happening? Maybe you have some more information that you didn't share in the last paper. So go into further detail because the goal is to paint a clear picture of what's happening currently. Aspect number 3, leadership development action plan based on the research. And here's the key to the paper. It includes specific actions, the resources needed, maybe not to the detail of the actual budget. If you want to do the budget, that's great too, but timelines. How and when is this going to happen? So if you say you're going to do focus groups or you're going to do convening, that whatever it is, listening circles, when? Sometime in the future or specifically, build on this and make this a real plan, including a table. I'll talk about the table in a bit, but then also include how the plan develops global and diverse leaders. Aspect number 4 of the paper, what are the factors that are going to help executing this plan? So think about the discussions. What about the barriers? What about, that's the next point, but what aspects will help make this plan a success? Maybe it's getting stakeholder input, maybe it's getting buy-in, maybe it is using the Cotter change model, getting small wins first of all. Aspect 5, now talk about the barriers. Who or what type of barriers will hinder this plan from being realized. Maybe they are people barriers. Maybe there are budget barriers. Maybe there are philosophical barriers. Whatever it is, list those barriers out. Finally, a strong conclusion that complements your writing. Don't just restate, hey, I talked about this, I talked about the action plan, I talked about the factors. No, what about those factors? What about the action plan? Make it clear and make it compelling. This is kind of your pitch, so to speak. All right, I talked about be sure to also develop global and diverse leaders. What does it mean to incorporate diverse perspectives? Whether that is a school setting and diverse student body, families, whether it's diverse stakeholders at an organization, corporate setting. Also, is your plan context bound? By context bound, that means is your plan limited by the setting that it is in? If your plan were transposed to another organization, would it fall apart? So think about that. Are you so detailed and focused in this one space that it won't work for another? Table. Let me go back to the table again. A good plan is going to have a APA formatted table, but the point is you should list out your steps and the detail in the narrative, and the table helps clarify that. So don't put everything in the table, but also put some things that can help clarify for the reader what the aspect of the plan, the barriers, factors of success, etc. And once again, the barriers, don't just say what those barriers are, but you want to address how to overcome them. All right. You know this image, APA 7, and I would like you to include an abstract in here. Remember, an abstract doesn't just preview the paper, but it also is about the summary and the aspects and the detail within the paper. Your writing is going to be important, the flow of ideas, synthesis, your transitions. There should be a logical flow to the paper. Don't forget good formatting, the margins, headers. Make sure your voice and expression. Don't mix up your voice saying, third person and then you go to first person. Don't be too wordy, etc. Don't forget your mechanics, Oxford comma, your periods, single space after a period. Yes, not double space, but single space. You know all this. This is APA 7. Okay, that's pretty much it for the paper, and I want to leave you with this one thing. Great quote that I love from Ty Howard. The best leaders not only inspire us, they develop and empower us to lead with passion from whatever position we currently hold in life. What a great quote to remind us of developing leaders of the future. I hope this video has helped. I look forward to reading your paper. Don't hesitate at any time to contact me if you have questions, concerns, comments, compliments, whatever, and I'll look forward to seeing all of you online.